So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, guys. I am Grace. I am a resident of Boston. I've actually lived here my whole life and went to BU and I graduated in 2017.
Tell us a little bit about your heart for God. And in John chapter 15, we're called to abide in him, which really means make our home in him, like to set up a residence in God and to let that be our safe place, our safe haven. And so I just love for you to share a little bit about your own heart for God and being someone who follows Jesus.
Yeah, I've been a Christian. I was raised as a Christian in a Christian family my whole life, but I think as of late, I've been really experiencing what it means to know Jesus like personally, which you hear a lot about, but I think that abiding has been a lot more prevalent, especially honestly because of COVID. Like the lack of communication with other people has really helped me cling to Jesus and experience him as a physical being, even though he's not, in person with me. I know through the Holy Spirit that he's with me. And that's been really kind of groundbreaking. Like I think knowing him my whole life and getting to this point in my journey, there were, a lot of different stages where I felt like I had to meet a certain mark or do a certain thing to be a Christian. And now I'm realizing more and more how genuinely a relationship it is. Like not only is Jesus a friend to me, he's also like a father figure, and he's also a shepherd, and he's also, yeah, the one who speaks through me and lives with me. And it's such a cool experience to like, yeah, it's a privilege and honor to get to be a part of that. So that's what I've been experiencing lately. And I pray that continues to grow. So,
I love that. I
mm,
mean, you said that's how you've been experiencing it lately, but I've always known you as someone who really wants to know God and wants God to change your heart and like mold it to be more like his. So it doesn't surprise me that he's teaching you something significant right now because you lean in to be taught, which I think is such a beautiful part of what John 15 talks about is like letting the Lord work in our lives, basically. So I love that. I mean, that's just who I know you to be as someone who wants God to work in your life. So I love
thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about your story. You're not just some random friend I called, even though I love you dearly. You're not some random friend I called. Like, tell us a little bit about your story in college,
Mhm.
about being a disciple of Christ, and then how that helped develop a heart to pour into other people or disciple others.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mentioned that I was raised in Boston, and when I got to BU specifically, I was like, I kind of had this realization of like, I feel like I'm one of the only Christians here. Like,
Mm.
even though I was familiar with the climate, I kind of was like, whoa, I'm like, I remember like the first night of college having my Bible and reading it and being like, am I the only one in this whole building that is reading my
Wow.
Bible? And I just felt like that smallness. But then it was so cool. Like I just knew that God was calling me to BU. He had made that very clear. And so I just like told him, I was like, I will do anything for you here. Like I'm ready to be used in this environment. And so I just prayed that a lot, I think the first semester. And I mean, lo and behold, I didn't know three floors down from me in Warren Towers was a group of intentional upperclassmen who were there to share the gospel with those they lived with. And, so little did I know that there were actually a lot of Christians around. And yeah, and just I think having that community early on with Crew was like so foundational to the way that I was able to experience my faith and walk with Jesus. I would say, I was thinking back on my college days, and I'd say that the most important thing was just having a heart that was open, like a heart that was open to be used. And like saying that prayer a lot, just like, God, just use me in any way. And then there were just opportunities that came up. He really did answer that prayer. Like I was thinking about this one story where I was coming up the Warren escalators. If you're a BU student, you'll know what those are. And saw this girl on the sofas there who just seemed really downcast. Like she seemed heavy to me, and I just felt like God was saying, you need to talk to that girl. And I didn't answer. I kind of just went by. I was like, I don't know, that'd be awkward. But then I ran into her in the dining hall. She was having trouble with like the salads or something, and so I helped her out with that. And then we ended up starting to talk, and yeah, I brought her to Crew, and just we started forming a friendship. And then she was raised in a Catholic home, but then had kind of fallen away and came back to faith through Crew. And now she's one of my best friends. And it's so cool to see just like the fact that God was like, you need to befriend this person. Like he was literally showing me people to befriend. And I think a
Wow.
lot of that is just like being available and just having a heart that's open to be used. And yeah, and that also worked through my time as an RA. That was a big piece, just like being intentional about praying where I was supposed to live every year. And that role really opened me up to some really cool relationships on my floor with underclassmen, and also friends that I've made who are on the RA staff. So I mean, it wasn't me, it was like God giving me, like he just was like, here are some people that I want you to love, and just like being present to loving. And mentorship and discipleship, I think, was a really important part of that.
I love that. I hear you saying that you prayed, like you were in conversation with God about how he might want to use you or what he might want you to see throughout the day, that you wanted to live your life with your eyes wide open. And so I just love that picture. So maybe tell a little bit about the story of Hannah and Melina and how, yeah, I mean, it's just fun to hear that story. So would you mind sharing that a little bit?
So Hannah, so when I was an RA, I think this was my senior year, she lived right across the hall from me. And I remember just getting to know her. She's a freshman, and she mentioned, she's like, yeah, I went to this event. I think it was like a Christian event. I was like, oh, interesting. Like, tell me more about it. And it ended up being Crew. And I was like, oh, I'm actually part of Crew. And so we hit it off really early on, and had just a really amazing relationship. Like, I think it was pretty countercultural. It's countercultural in college, I think, in general, for like a senior to befriend a freshman and freshman to befriend a senior. But that was my experience as a freshman. You know, I had friends who were seniors, and I had other freshmen being like, how did you get friends who were seniors? I'm like, well, Crew, you know, like it didn't make a big difference. Just being, you know, being a child of God kind of evened the playing field in that way. But yeah, Hannah and I became good friends. Like, we're able to speak into each other's lives. And then Melina was a friend I also knew through Crew. And I remember I was getting ready to graduate that year, and the two of them had kind of, you know, been walking alongside each other in life group and different discipleship group. And I just remember having the sense of like, these two would be really good for each other. I was like, so why don't you guys consider living together next year? They were like, oh, we hadn't thought of that. Yeah, let's go for it. And so they did, and just had, I mean, it seems like they've really developed a really sweet friendship. And so again, that's kind of just like God using relationships to really like bring more of him in. And that was exciting, and an exciting part of yeah, just my time. Again, it just felt like, wow, I just feel really like not lucky, but just really fortunate to be here and to be used in this way. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I remember having a conversation when you were a student, and they assumed you were discipling them. Like they would have said, Grace is my discipler, or Grace mentors me.
Mhm.
But did you say that? Like, would you have said that as a student, or did you kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, I did formally spend some discipleship time with Hannah, I remember, but and Melina too, but it was almost more to me like just a really good relationship, you know? Like I think I was like, well, of course we're going to talk about deep things. Of course we're going to talk about what we're learning from the Bible. Like, of course we'll talk about those things. But I would say it was more of a natural, like flowing, like inflowing of honestly a lot of what I had learned from people who were older than me, and just sitting down like at a coffee shop and having that conversation. So that was just cool. Again, being available to that relationship was really important.
Yeah, I love that story because I think sometimes we build up this idea of multiplication being this like really rigid formal thing. And the reality is that I learn things from freshmen that I meet with that are in my G3 right now. And I've been doing ministry for a long time. So every week I learn things from them, and they learn things from me. And it's part of being the body of Christ. But that is discipleship of like being in each other's lives and talking about real things and being intentional to
Mhm.
pour out what the Lord has poured into us into the lives of others. And I love that you did that as a student. So it's really fun. Kind
Mhm.
of the last question is Well, oh, I was going to say one thing. So in First Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8, it talks about how we were, I'll just read it. I was going to paraphrase it, but I'll just read it. That's a better way to
Do
do
you have
it.
it
So
memorized? That's
I
impressive.
do, but not like as well. It says, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become so very dear to us. And I just love that picture of like, we didn't just share the gospel with people. We didn't just like talk about the gospel, but we actually shared our lives, and that is part of being a Christian. That's part of following Jesus and pouring into others, is sharing our lives with one another. And I just, Grace, I think you do that so well. You've done that so well as a student. You did that well when we went overseas together. You do that well now. You just do a great job of sharing your life with others and helping point them to Jesus. So yeah. So the last question is just, what have others done to help you grow, and then that you've been able to turn around and kind of pour that into others? So just kind of small ideas or
Yeah.
big picture ideas, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. What older students did for me in college and what crew staff did for me was just, they just would ask me a simple question, or just like make a space, like just be like, hey, do you want to hang out? And just like leave the door open to conversation. I think, especially on a college campus, I feel like there are a lot of lonely people. It seems that way. And I remember feeling that way, especially as a freshman early on. And yeah, just having upperclassmen or having someone above me just be like, hey, do you want to hang out? Do you want to create a space? And that like led the way to like a lot of really good connection and conversation. And then I think the other thing that was big for me when I became an upperclassman was just, and I saw this modeled to me through upperclassmen when I was an underclassman, was vulnerability. Being like, I really don't have it together. I'm really struggling with like this and this and this, and just like that opportunity to be vulnerable and accountable, I think, to each other, I think was a very important step for me to see like, oh, the Christian walk isn't about having it all together or like following rules. It's about, again, like abiding in Christ and letting him do the work through you. And so that was another big piece, was just seeing the vulnerability of my leaders. And yeah, and just being invited to like a homey environment. Like I feel like anytime I got to spend time with you, Melissa, or like any of the crew staff, and just like I just felt right at home, like in a place that sometimes felt a little overwhelming or not as welcoming. That was always so needed and welcome. Yeah.
I love that. I love that phrase of just creating space. And I find you to be someone who does create great space for people, and that you aren't driven by a to-do list. You're driven by, what is the Lord going to do? How's he going to show up? How am I going to create space for people? And yet on the same hand, I find that you are like really devoted, and you're a great student, and you're an amazing artist, and like you have so many gifts. So it's not like you're just like, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to those things, but I think you live your life with people in mind, and you want that to be a big part of your life. And I just love that and admire that about you. So I love the kind of call to create space. So well, is there anything else, just kind of knowing that you're just a couple of years ahead of most of the students, like that you would encourage them in to take advantage of while they're in college?
Something I wish I had known or told I could tell my college self, is that school is important, and like class work is important. Like you were saying, I was a big nerd. I studied a lot and was really, my classwork was important. But something that I think I learned while I was in school, or that I kind of had God teach me, was that the only things that are eternal are people. Like we will carry on to the next life, and those relationships you make are really important. And like God has things in store, I think, for those relationships. And so if you have a person, and even just praying and saying, God, who in my life, in my college dorm or campus or whatever, or a friend, do you have that you want me to kind of invest in? And then just invest in those people and spend time doing that. Like I think that that's really important. Because when I look back at school, I remember those moments of connection way more than I honestly remember like my coursework or classwork, as important as that is. But just those relationships that I still honestly have now because of Crew and what Jesus did in those relationships, like those are so priceless to me and I'm so grateful. So I would just say like invest in people. Like I think that's really important. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Grace, so much for being with us. And maybe we'll have you back in person one time when COVID's all lifted and we can be
I
in
love
person.
that. I would love that. I miss it. I miss you guys. Yeah.
I know. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank
Okay.
you.